you know, we still need the stories, whether we read modern novels or not. It's like, we need that connection, whether it's with our elders or with our kids. We pass these stories on as something precious. For me personally, it's probably just the unknown. I've always been drawn more to the unknown and whatever the beyond of normal life. So I would actually go out and look for these. We would go to haunted houses. We would go to haunted areas of the cities, see what was going on. Yeah. Now, whatever that comes from, I don't know, but it kept life interesting.
It was almost like an escape.
Definitely an escape. Family life was not a happy life, so that was an escape. Oh, definitely.
Hey, welcome to the Floaties for Krakens podcast. I am your host, Camille Maria Costa, and it is a brilliant day to be monstrous. Hey there, wonderful Cuttlefish. Welcome back to Season 3, Episode 11 of Floaties for Krakens. Woof. Long time no see, guys. How's everybody doing? How was your holiday? I really hope that you were able to spend some time with loved ones and rest your beautiful little minds and bodies. Oh, and happy 2025. I gotta be honest, January has been quite the month, hasn't it? Listen, we are in a very confusing time right now, and there's a lot of unknown about the future, and that can feel really unsettling and really lonely. And I just want to let you know that you are loved and appreciated for all that you are. You're a beautiful human being, worthy and deserving of a safe and loving life, and we are so happy that you are here. Please, 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 please take today to walk in the grass, sip a cup of coffee, wear the coziest socks imaginable, and just breathe. You matter. We are thrilled to continue our third season of the show today. I can't begin to tell you how pumped I was to film this interview because our guest is one of the most kind, most knowledgeable monster lovers I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. What they're doing for the gaming world is freaking sick, and it is my utmost pleasure to introduce you to Andy Boyd. Andy is the owner and game designer behind Pandian Games. He has a love for old summer camp nostalgia and the outdoors in general. Growing up, he spent many hours playing point-and-click adventure games and is where his love of storytelling grew. His games draw inspiration from some of his favorite shows and games such as Gravity Falls, Outer Wilds, Grim Fandango, The Longest Journey, Psychonauts, Over the Garden Wall, and Hilda, to name a few. Those are all great, by the way. Andy loves finding just the right mechanics to pair with the different types of stories each of his games explore. Andy, thank you so incredibly much for joining us on Floaties, and thank you for creating the powerful work that you do. It's just so amazing to see how much thought and care you put into your games, and in turn, it helps make us monstrous folks feel less alone, like we actually have a place on the game board. Come back anytime. Just a quick content warning for this episode. In the following interview, there will be mentions and discussions of mental health difficulties, depression, anxiety, animal death, human death, body horror, and gore in this episode. Do whatever you need to do to feel safe. Alrighty then. Without further ado, ladies and cuttlefish, let me introduce to you Campfire Stories for Wendigos. Well, hello again, Andy. It's
Hello.
so lovely to officially meet you.
Yeah, you too. I'm really happy that you reached out and I'm able to come onto the show. I'm excited.
We are just so lucky. This is going to be so much fun. And I've been following you. Well, okay, so like funny story, right? Like with Floaties for Krakens, we I hadn't been on social media for a long time before that. And one of the first times I was like, once we did this show, I was like, well, we got to have some sort of, media, social media presence. And one of the very first people we followed was you all.
Really?
Yes, because I happened to see an ad in Instagram, as they do, and
Yep.
it was one of your games, and I was like, this is the coolest freaking thing I've
Oh,
ever
that's cool.
seen in my life. And yeah, so this is a long time coming, and I'm very excited that you're here.
That's really cool. I also like right before I started Pandy, and I was also like off social media for like 8 years,
Yeah,
and like I had to relearn how to use social media because I was like, what is all this stuff? Like, how am I supposed to communicate? Why are people like linking things in different ways? Yeah, so I feel that like coming back to it.
it's tough. It's changing all of the time. People are so fancy and cool on it, and
Right?
goodness, I'm just over here, like you said, trying my best to link something
Yep.
accurately,
Yeah.
every time I can.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. Okay, well, I know we kind of mentioned your wonderful company a little bit, but before we get into that masterfulness, Andy, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Who are you, and what
Sure.
do you do?
So my name's Andy Boyd. I don't know what I do. So I've worked in education my entire life, right? Like it's real hard to talk about yourself.
I
But
know.
I've worked in education my entire life on the like IT side of things. But I've also like would always go out camping on the weekends in order to like reset and like rebuild myself from being in tech and IT and all that stuff. And I've been doing that for 20 plus years.
Wow.
And yeah, like we'd go hiking. I've lived in an RV for a year. Right after COVID hit, we sold everything and moved into an 80 square foot RV, like a little,
Oh.
um, and drove around the US camping for about a year. And that's actually like when I started game design was in the RV, and we can get into that later.
Oh my gosh.
Um,
Okay, great.
yeah, and it's kind of like a midlife crisis is what it felt like. But
I know.
I was like 28, right? Is
Yeah.
like it was not midlife
Yeah.
yet. But yeah, and so I just got done working with universities and have been in education universities and helping out everything from like video production to smart classrooms and stuff like that. And that's always been my big focus.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, now it's uh, going out camping and writing games and publishing books and stuff like that is what I do now.
Living
So
the dream, really.
yeah, yeah. No, honestly, I'm incredibly lucky to be able to do this. I've worked hard, and it was very opaque to like get into it. Like, hey, how do you do these things? And everybody's like, I don't know, good luck. Um, but like, I was able to learn from a bunch of different people in order to get to where I am now.
Mm.
So I'm very very gracious to be able to do this.
Yeah. That's amazing. I love it. I love when people are like, I don't know, like little quilts of, right? Like of people that have had impressions on them or
Hmm.
situations. Like you said, I know you said like it was a midlife crisis. And I feel like everybody was in such a crisis at that time and
Oh yeah.
around the pandemic. And I think it obviously was horrible and really tough and really hard. But like, I think there was such beautiful creativity that kind of was forced to come out of us in a way, you know?
Oh, I totally agree. Yeah, and I think people were finally given time to be creative. I think that's something that came out of the
Mm,
pandemic. Obviously, not everybody. A lot of
sure.
people got even busier.
Yeah.
But I do feel like there were a lot of moments where, especially in like 2021, is kind of when we started. There was a lot of people where the creativity flourished, and we were all like, "Hey, what if we released this, or we did this, or let's
Ah,
throw this out here and see what sticks." I think a lot of that came out of kind of the whole shutdown that
yeah.
occurred.
That's a
Yeah,
really good way of putting it. It's
yeah,
sometimes really hard to find the time to just let go and be creative. And also, I think a lot of, like you said, a lot of walls were down because we
hmm
couldn't really physically see anybody. And so
Yeah.
maybe a lot of that social anxiety also is just like, oh well, like I can't see the
Yep.
person looking at this, so
Exactly. We're just gonna throw it out there. It's gonna be fine.
yeah, see what, like you said,
Yeah.
see what sticks. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
So what has always drawn you to like the outdoors and the wilderness, Andy? I know you said like camping has been such a big
Yeah.
part of your escape.
So I think so. I grew up in a rather small town in the middle of what I'm going to call corn country in Illinois,
Yeah.
and so really the only things that there were to do was either we were going to go to the bowling alley or you're going to go out camping.
Yeah.
And there wasn't, or maybe to the mall, right? And you would just hang out at the mall and be a mall rat, is what we'd
Yes.
call ourselves, right? And those were your three options. And if you didn't have the money to go bowling, then you were just going to go camping. And if you
Huh.
didn't want to go camping, then you were going to go hang out at the mall, right? And
Right.
so we did spend a lot of time growing up just going out camping. And I had friends who's had relatives that owned farms, and so would go out to their farmlands and like go camp
Mm.
in the pastures and stuff because that's just
Wow.
what you did.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of, especially during spring, fall, and summer. There was a lot of just like sitting around a campfire and chatting and camping and bringing out your carload of stuff and just kind of goofing off in the woods.
Yeah.
Go laying on the roadway at a state park and just looking up at the stars, kind of thing, because the road's closed because it all closes at dawn or
Right.
in dusk. Um,
Right.
so yeah, it was just, I think it was more out of just necessity of something to do is how it
Mm.
started. And then from there, like I was in Boy Scouts for a little bit. It didn't really click with me. So then I did Venture Scouts for a little bit, which is kind of the adult Boy Scouts, I think is how they refer
Yeah.
to it. It's basically like, hey, you want to go out on some adventures? Like, let's all get together, but you have to be over the age of 18 kind of thing. So we did that for a little
Interesting.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
Very interesting.
in junior high, we had a thing called outdoor education. And outdoor education was a week. We were out at a summer campsite, and you had canvas tents and cots, and they taught you like outdoor skills while also teaching you mathematics and
Oh my
your
gosh.
junior high curriculum, right? And I absolutely fell in love with that. I absolutely
Yeah.
loved that to death. And it's like your same teachers that taught you in your junior high school were out there, and they were like your camp counselors as well. So like you
Wow.
knew them, and that was just such a cool experience that I got really enamored with the idea of like summer camp in general.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, from that experience, right? Like there's definitely like in like 4-H camps and Boy Scout camps and all this other stuff, but my experience was like junior high. Your teachers are there. You're like they're teaching you how to tie fishing knots and go fishing, and also being like, do you know what a hypotenuse is? Like at the same time, right? Like
By the
it
way.
was just cool, right? It was a cool experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds like a really cool experience and such a like
Yeah.
lovely way to connect like with
Yeah.
each other as young kids, and but also with
Yeah.
your teachers, right? Seeing them kind of as humans. I feel like that can be
Yeah.
hard sometimes.
It was definitely one of the first moments where I was just like, oh, these are people. Which as a
Yeah.
kid, like you don't know it. You're just like, that's a teacher.
Yeah.
And you don't correspond that with a human being that has a life and is complex and things like that at that age.
No.
Like you're just like, well, as soon as I leave school, they stop existing. Is kind of your
Exactly.
mentality. And then it's not until I kind of went to this event and like we're sitting around a campfire and our teacher's also there and he's just laid back chilling, and
Yeah.
he's like, well, I'm going to go to bed, y'all just make sure to go to bed before midnight or just don't be loud, right? And we were like, what is happening? This is amazing. And so we drug all of our cots out around the campfire because we were like, he just said don't be loud. And so we drug all of our cots out from the tent and slept around the campfire. And of course it starts raining on us,
Of
but we
course.
didn't care. And so like being able to do that, and then it was a really bonding experience with like the students, and then also like seeing that your teachers are human, which is cool.
Yeah. That's so lovely. It's such a nice sense of freedom too that I think is so important to have at that age. Like have trust from an adult, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
to be like, yeah, just have a good time, do your thing, be
Yep.
safe, of
Be
course,
safe.
but
If you
have
wake me up,
fun.
you're in trouble,
Yeah,
right? That was the
I
limit. That
will.
was the limit of like where it is, where Like, I trust you until you wake me up,
And
and
then
then
it's over.
we know there's a problem. Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
right. I bet it was so hard too, because I'm sure you guys are like chatting and having fun and
Oh, like looking back on it, they're just laying awake and they're just like, okay, where are my earplugs? Like, I'm not going out there. They're fine, but oh my gosh, they've
clearly.
got to quiet down.
That's
Yeah.
so fantastic. That's so cool. What a really cool program.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if they're still doing it for in the school system that I used to go to. I know that they were still doing it for a while, and it like waned off around the No Child Left Behind era, and then so I don't know if it's come
Gotcha.
back yet.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it was a cool program.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I venture to believe, right, that a person such as yourself having so much experience outdoors, especially in the wilderness, do you have a like relationship with the world of the spooky or horror?
Oh yeah. Even going back before any of that, I used to think my house was haunted, and my
Yeah.
sister didn't help me. So my sister's 8 years older than I am, and she would like we would like she'd pull me into the closet and tell me ghost stories, kind of things, right? Like just to
Yeah.
spook me.
Yeah.
And I remember where I'd have to I begged my mom to get me like a little plastic tent that would go over my bed so I
Oh
could
my
like be
gosh.
safe after hearing these ghost stories. Like it was crazy, right? And
Yeah.
then we could have sworn that we could always hear the family radio going. This dates me, but like we had a boombox radio,
Of
and it would
course.
like so you could listen to the morning news like when you're getting ready for school and stuff. And
Exactly.
we could swear that it would start playing music late at night,
Oh
and then
no.
my sister and I would both go downstairs and the radio is off, you don't hear it anymore, like that kind of stuff. So that was going on way before I like, and I'm like 8, right?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm very young. And so like that's definitely where it started. We were always telling each other stories and building upon each other, and ghosts were definitely like the first thing, right? That
Mhm.
of the spooky. And I also remember like because my sister was so much older than I was, like sneaking down when she would have her friends over and they'd be watching horror movies or
Oh
ghost
man.
movies, right? And like sneaking in and being like, well, I'm traumatized for life now. But it was my own fault. So I'm like crawling on the floor to go see what they're watching.
Of course, you're just
Um,
curious.
yeah, and then like they would get out, the Ouija boards, and at
Oh
night, like I
boy.
would go sneak into their bed, my sister's bedroom. She'd have her friends over, and I'd like crawl under the bed and like reach up my arm to scare them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So we were just always, spooking each other and trying to play pranks and stories and stuff like that. So yeah,
That's so
I've always been deep
beautiful.
in it.
It
Right?
is.
Yeah,
It is. Heartwarming. Like that's just such a
yeah,
fun relationship I think to have and core memories clearly, right? That
yeah,
that were created. But I love that. I love when people's like first experiences with horror, like you said, are like a haunted house or like ghosts, right? Because I don't know, it's so
yeah,
fun to talk about and like you said, scare each other with and have these visceral reactions.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and that's so fun. Ghosts or something else.
Yeah, especially and especially in the era of like we lived I grew up in the era of Ouija board
Oh
mania,
yeah.
and
Oh yeah.
so like naming the ghosts and like have talking to them kind of thing, right? And
Yes.
especially since I was the younger one in that situation, and so I'm watching these other people move the board around. I never ended up touching a Ouija board because they're like,
Yeah.
no, 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 you can't do that.
Right, like, "No,
Um,
no, please."
Right, yeah, and so I'm just watching, and I'm like watching their reactions as a little kid,
My
um,
gosh.
and yeah, so that was definitely like kind of the first experience, the first way that I got into all of that, and
Yeah.
I just love the stories behind. Like I love telling horror stories.
Mm.
I love telling stories around the campfire. I think that's really where it started.
Why do you think that, like, stories I mean, they're just so much fun. Like, why is storytelling like, across ages, across times,
Yeah,
right? Like, why is just sitting down and telling each other stories such a good time?
I I don't know. I I think it's inherent to humanity, like being human. Like it's one of the reasons why we were able to progress is
Mm.
we had this ability of language and we were able to share ideas through story, and stories stick with you, right? Like if I just give
Mm.
you dry facts, like here's a bullet point, like that doesn't stick with you as much as a story that relates information in some way,
Yeah.
right? And of course, you're going to get into the situation of telephone and how stories degrade and change over time because of that.
Right.
But I also think, from just a shared communal perspective, of just like I'm telling a story to an audience and they're having a reaction, that makes me feel good. They're enjoying, right? They're using their imagination, but then also sitting around and building a story together with someone else
Mm.
where you just kind of start unraveling something and they add something in, you're like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. So what happens is you go over here and do this. And I think that's TTRPGs, right? That's
Yeah.
games
That's
with
games.
rules, and we would always just sit around and just do that without rules and just build stories, and
Mm.
talk about stories. um, so I think that's why we're seeing, not to divert topics too much from storytelling, but I think that's why we're seeing a huge explosion in tabletop, is because
Oh
it's
yeah.
storytelling, right? It's like, hey, yeah,
Yes.
it gives you an excuse. It's like, yes, you can go sit around and you can tell this kind of story.
Yeah.
Have fun. Go have fun. Um,
Yes.
yeah. So
Oh
yeah,
my
I
God.
yeah,
Absolutely.
I think storytelling is inherent to what makes us human.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Truthfully, it's so organic and so beautiful just to, as you mentioned, connect with another person in that way. And not even just like you physically in that moment, but the people maybe in the story, the people that maybe started that story. Like it's just such a beautiful, beautiful medium for human connection.
Oh,
And
I agree.
through gaming too, right?
Yeah.
Like you mentioned,
Oh yeah. Well, I
which,
think I think like with tabletop and video games and all that, right? Like that is shared. That's interactive storytelling, which I think is just, it gets the watcher involved in different ways. I mean, movies have always been about storytelling, but you're there
yeah,
absorbing the story being told at you as opposed to being able to contribute in some way. Um,
yeah.
and I think being able to contribute is really clicks with people.
Oh, absolutely. Not only is it just fun, but it's kind of awesome to have a sense of autonomy and like I can
Yeah.
make a decision
Yeah.
here and it might be the wrong one, it might be the right, I don't know, right? But like I
Right.
have that choice.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's especially when you get somebody responding to that choice, and you realize this, stories that are not predetermined are
Yeah.
really interesting. So like, yeah, you're saying, you're like, I can make a choice, and that choice impacts something, and we've created something that would not have otherwise existed.
Yeah.
It's really cool, and I think there was a study done. It was a while ago, but it was
Yeah.
essentially like the reason why people end up talking about their like game campaigns, tabletop role playing campaigns as if it happened, is because we're mentally internalizing it has happened, right? Our imagination's so strong. We're sitting around the table, we're in the world, we're living that story with those characters, and we internalize that as something that has happened.
Mm,
So like it's not just like, oh, you're reading the book through the eyes of this other character and it's um, something that happened to them.
right.
When you're playing your character, it's happening to you, and you kind of internalize that, and that's such a cool thing. So then you really
Yeah.
can go travel to other worlds and other dimensions.
Yes. And have that sense of escape, which is
Yeah.
so vital, I think, for everybody. And
Yeah.
like you said too, there's also that beautiful creation of empathy,
Hmm.
which is so
Yeah.
fun, right? And complex, of course, but I think being able to, if only for an hour, right, in
Right.
your like for D&D, for example, right, like you get
Yeah.
to kind of experience maybe choosing somebody that is not like you at all, right, for
Oh yeah.
example, and
Oh yeah.
explore them and see what they would do or why, how they would think or why they are the way that they are.
Yeah.
And that's fun. Like that is
Oh
really
yeah. It's a
cool to
blast.
be able to
It's
do.
one of the reasons I enjoy running the games is I
Yes.
get to experience not just my one character as a player, but I get to experience all of these characters. I have no idea what characters I'm going to be running into because the players
Right.
kind of dictate that. And so they're like, hey, we want to go talk to this person. And I'm like, okay, what is that person? Oh, they're, gruff, and maybe, they're older and this and that. And they've got this, right? Like, and then go like, I'm going to be that character for a second.
Yeah.
You get to really think about those intricacies
Yes.
of the different characters. Yeah.
That's
It's a lot of
so
fun.
fun. I bet you're a great DM. I bet it is so much fun to to lead these games.
It's a lot of fun to run them. Yeah.
Oh, I bet. Well, of course, speaking right about gaming, can you
Mhm.
please, Andy, tell us a little bit about Pandian Games?
Yeah. So Pandian Games, it's the business that I run. We make and publish tabletop role playing games. I think we've got 12 titles now, and really our games focus on more narrative driven, lighter rule sets that kind of get out of your way and allow play to happen. And
Yeah.
I think also importantly, we de-emphasize combat. So we I try to write our games in a way where either there is no combat inherently, right? Which all of our horror games do not have combat because it is
Yes.
scarier if you can't beat the monster.
Yes.
Right? And
Yes.
so like work really hard to say, hey, like you might be able to fight something, but the rules are set up in such a way where it goes, there's many other options, and combat might be the riskiest one if you want to go that route. So
Mm.
yeah, but yeah, I think we've got 12 games, which is amazing. That I think we've known it for 3.5 years, something like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been a journey, to say the
Oh my
least.
gosh. Andy, like, and I can't even like begin to tell you like how freaking awesome your brain is and how creative this company is. Like, it is breathtaking. Like, just I am so it really is like it's so brilliant in the different mediums, like you just said, right, on the explorations of defeating something, right, in this way,
Mhm.
playing that game, but also using the medium of journaling, right,
Yeah.
and using, right, like we just talked about this idea kind of choosing your own adventure and making these decisions and playing through it yourself, and also just to have the ability to play by yourself,
Mhm.
and
Oh
right
yeah.
there in that moment is
Yeah, but
awesome.
solo is such a cool thing that's coming onto the scene now. And it's fairly new, right? It's really
Yeah,
only been around since about 2020. Now there have been other things that have allowed you to play solo, but I think it's really gained popularity since 2020.
right.
It's just so cool to see it flourish and explode.
Oh my gosh. It's awesome, Andy. Like what you do is just so freaking cool. And like, okay, so I hope
Yeah.
it's okay. I have the games
Oh,
right
please.
here with me.
Okay. Yeah. No,
um
yeah. Please.
because I'm so excited about them and they're so beautiful and I just like want to show an example, kind of, if anybody
Yeah.
um hasn't heard of these games yet, which is you've been living under a rock. Please get all of these games. So this is the one that actually led me to you all.
Okay.
So this is
Oh,
the
whispers.
Whispers.
Yeah.
Yes. I was so fascinated. So it's Whispers in the Walls, right? And it's titled A Solo Horror Journaling Game, right? And just that idea in itself,
Yeah.
what, right? Like, it's so exciting and so
Yeah.
fun, right? Like,
Yeah. And
how?
it's so interestingly, this came about due to a prompt, I believe, by another creator named Mamedos, who said something along the lines of um, a horror game, you play this by yourself in the dark, something to that effect. And
Mm.
I was like, hey, like I have this idea, and like we riffed ideas, and this was all on Twitter and Twitter comments, and like we riffed
Yes.
some ideas, and then I sat down and I wrote Whispers over the course of I think 2 weeks, because there's actually a lot of words in that game for how, like, it's only
Yeah.
44 pages, but there's a lot of
There's a
words in that
lot.
game.
Yeah.
And so it was my first time. Whispers was really my first time being like, how would a solo game work? I don't know. Like, how
Yeah.
do you make solo games? And obviously it was horror, and so the question comes up of like, well, do you have combat? Like, can you defeat it? And I was like, no, you're an observer. You are responding to things that happen to you,
Mm.
and so there's kind of a mystery mechanic in it where things happen to you, you're prompted with questions, and you're gathering clues to then ultimately decide what what happened, and that's 100% up to you as the player. You get done and you look over everything that's happened to you and you go, this is the secret that the walls held, right? um and it's just like, I don't even know how I came up with it, honestly, right? Like, the creative process is one of those where so I wrote this in the RV, actually, when I was traveling full time in an RV, and I
Did
was
you
literally sitting
really?
at our yeah. So I was sitting on a little dinette table with my little laptop, just
Yeah.
kind of like staring out the window, kind of thing, just writing on this, and yeah, it just grew, and then eventually we did the second edition. So what you have is the second edition,
Right.
and the artwork. I want to give a little quick shout out about that artwork. Came from a player's playthrough. So somebody played Whispers in the Walls.
Uh-huh.
Their names are Shia and Turtle, and
Shout
they did
out.
an illustrated playthrough. And afterwards, they were like, "Hey, would you like to have this artwork? You can use it in your book." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, yes, I would love that." And so
Yeah.
about 3 months later, I finally it finally clicked how to use the artwork, and I made this,
Oh my
the second edition with that artwork. Um, but yeah, it was super cool. That whole game, it has a super cool history behind it.
My God, that's so cool, Andy. Like,
Thank
it's
you.
so just a fun, organic way. And I mean, I think the most fascinating thing is it's almost therapeutic,
Mhm.
right? Like there, of course, right, like journaling in any form, right, is lovely to take thoughts in your head and put them on paper,
Yeah.
especially when it gets too busy up there. Um,
Yeah.
but you give the gamer such freedom, I think,
Yeah.
to explore and be an observer in that way.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like like again, when we talk about this idea and sense of autonomy, and how hard it can be to not defeat monsters necessarily, but
Yeah.
approach them, even to acknowledge
Yeah.
them, even to, right, it can be so hard and so scary. And I think that's what's so cool and meta, about your
Yeah.
game.
So I have had multiple players reach out and said that their playthroughs actually helped them work through their own trauma. Like, the
Oh,
monsters, the things they were discovering was their own trauma, things that had been bothering them, and that helped them. And that's such a cool thing that wasn't ever in my mind when I was writing it, and the fact that people are able to do that with something that I've written and published is such a great feeling. I absolutely love that.
yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool. So when you talk about approaching monsters, that is something. Some people are approaching very personal monsters with
Yeah.
whispers, and that is such
Yeah.
a cool thing if I can enable that for people.
That's so beautiful. Like, what a lovely way, to do this through game, through
Yeah.
stories, through that. Like, I don't know,
Yeah.
that's you make, feeling and experiencing so accessible with your games. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're so cool, everyone. Like, they're illustrated so beautifully, and they're handheld, and you got them, and you can take them on an RV, right? Take them on a
Yep.
plane, sit in
Yeah.
the dark.
Yep.
You have so many different ways of gameplay, but they're all
Yeah.
accessible, which is
Yeah.
great.
And I think that started with, so the very first game I wrote was Storyteller,
Yeah,
which I need
yes.
to. It's one of the few books that I haven't like gone back to update. So
Yeah.
it is like the original artwork of me. Like, I have no budget. I know I'm unemployed. I'm living in an RV. Like, I'm just trying to make something. Right. It's still in that form, and but that game is accessible in that I wanted to write it in a way where I don't know the people that I'm sitting around playing with. I'm at a campfire. I have no lighting. I have no flat surface. How do I make a game
Yeah.
with resolution? Right. So, like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen next. I need to resolve this.
Yeah.
Um, but I might not have dice. I might not have a table. I don't have a pencil. I don't have cards. How
No.
do I do this?
Yeah.
And so what I basically came up with was these different tasks. It could be a skill task, a knowledge task, or a physical task. And you're having to solve them like there's a 30% chance. So like flipping a bottle. If you
Yes.
land on the bottom, it's a success. If you can land it on the, the top of the bottle, like it's a critical success. And if it fumbles, then you fumbled the roll essentially.
Right, right.
And like, so people are out there flipping their water bottles, or if you can identify 3 of the plants around you, then you succeed. But if you can only identify 2, there's a complication. So like, I wanted to basically make it so there's multiple ways, and so it's just a bunch of mini games. You can play rock paper scissors, right? Like with whoever's running the game in order
Right.
to see if you succeed. Um, so that's the first game I ever wrote, and I think that idea of like accessibility and making it easy for people to approach the game and approach its mechanics stuck from there on out.
Yeah.
And I've never wanted to get into really crunchy games just
Hmm.
because I don't find them accessible.
Yeah.
Especially somebody with an ADHD brain. Like,
Yeah.
I just start reading the rules and my brain's off over here now doing something else, and I was like, wait a minute, what did I just read? um,
Yes,
right.
exactly. Yes.
But so one of the things I work really hard on is not just the mechanics, but also like making it easy to read, like interesting to
Mm,
look at, like all of the artwork and
of
stuff like that.
course. Yeah.
But I there are some games out there, they're absolutely beautiful.
Sure.
I don't know what they're about because I look at the page and my brain turns off.
Yeah.
And it just goes, nope, you're not absorbing that. And so I work really hard to make sure that doesn't happen with our games while still
Yeah.
being, accessible and readable and interesting. I love interesting layouts, right? I love Whispers is a great example of, I try to make the layout, the book feel like how you would feel
Yes.
playing the game. Yeah.
Yes. It's just so, oh my gosh, you really think about everything. Everything. Like, and it's so obvious. Like, you can just tell how much love is in every single one of these games. Like, it is so obvious that you thought through everything. And I really appreciate that. Like, that is so cool. So cool.
I appreciate that. I
Yeah.
really do. I appreciate that because there are some games that I've written in a day, and then I
Wow.
go back, and so our 2-player game, Badger and Coyote, literally
Yes.
started off like I woke up and I was like, I have this idea, and like 3 hours later, I had its rough draft written. Right,
Oh
it
my
was just
gosh.
boom, done. And uh, then I went back to it, and I made it from a 1-page game to a little 12-page booklet, and that did really well, and people seemed to really enjoy it and connect with it. And I was like, okay, let's give people more of this. And so then I went back and I was like, here's what I don't like about it. Here's what could do better. And then
Yeah.
let's also expand it, give people more options. And then now it's a 48-page book that had a crowdfunding campaign behind it, right? But that first draft was, I think it was like 3 hours. It was just
Yeah.
like woke up one morning and the bug had bit me, and I was like, I know what this is. I know what
That's
this is going to be,
awesome.
right?
Yeah.
So sometimes it happens, and then other times it's allows like I have this idea and I have no idea what to do with it yet, and so you put it on a document and you let it sit and stew for a little bit, and then like a week later you write a little bit more, right? And so it's both both happen, but I try to spend enough time with each to make
Yeah.
them something that I would like.
Yeah, yes, of course, that
Right.
you would sit down and play right then and
Yeah,
there.
yeah, exactly.
And
I think
Banjo
it helps that
Coyote
I
is
was.
beautiful.
Oh, thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. I love it like a duet game. Like, here's a lazy Sunday afternoon, or here's a date night game, or something like
Yeah.
that. And it's just meant to be mischief. None of it's
Yes.
meant to be like, oh well, we've got to go clear this dungeon, or oh, here's a political intrigue of the king. It's just like, hey, we're a badger and we're a coyote, and these bears are trying to steal some honey.
Yeah, here's some
Like, okay,
shenanigans.
cool, yeah, there's some shenanigans to get
Yeah,
into, right?
yeah.
So I think we need a lot of that in this world. I
Mhm.
love silly games and
Yeah,
humorous, cozy stuff.
yeah.
It's great.
Well, you succeed. Definitely
Oh,
so
thank you.
with your
Thank you.
games. I mean, they're lovely. And I'm excited. I'm excited to see. And I know we were talking a little bit before this, but you said now you're working on games full time, right?
Yes, yeah. So as of, I don't even know what today's date is. As of
The
January 10th, it's the
Yep, yep.
25th. So as of
That's
January
so
10th, I am now
cool.
full time with Pandian.
Oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
which is just crazy. Like I went in being like, I would love to do this full time. I
Hmm.
don't know how to accomplish it. I have no clue how this is going to work.
Yeah,
Um, and a year and a half in, I was like, well, this is never going to happen, but I'm going to keep going because I like doing it. And
yeah.
then it was late last year. I was like, you know what? I think we can actually pull the trigger and we can do this, and we can, it'll still be, there's still risk. There's still like, I don't know.
Sure.
But for now, I I'm able to do it, and it's great, and it's really exciting. I'm really excited. Yeah,
Congratulations. It's so well
thank you.
deserved. And I'm
Appreciate
excited to
that.
see. I mean, it's so freaking impressive that you had full-time jobs, right? And you were doing all of this work. So I can only imagine
Right?
what gaming will look like from now on. So I think it'll be a fun creative journey.
I have a huge list. I have
Yeah.
a huge list of games that I want to make.
Yeah.
There's a big one that I'm working on right now, which is probably one of the biggest games I've ever written.
Oh
But
my
there's
gosh.
still a ton of little games, like the size of Badger and Coyote and stuff that
Yeah.
I have ideas for that I really want to get out there.
Oh
So it'll
heck
be a
yeah.
combination of the two as I go back and forth.
That's so fun. That's so exciting. It's going to
Yeah,
be a great year, I think, for you, Andy. It's going to be super great.
I hope so.
It will be. It will be.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, we've been throwing around this term a little bit already, in us talking thus far, but I'm really interested. What, in your words, in your mind, Andy, what do you think is the definition of a monster?
I think, ooh, so I think a monster is something that is potentially dangerous and
Yeah.
otherworldly in some way, right? Supernatural.
Yeah.
Like when you think about ghosts, or you think about the Wendigo, our topic today,
Yeah.
or even sillier things like the tea kettler, which is one of just my favorite silly folklorian pieces. It's
Yes.
still dangerous. It's still otherworldly. It's still unnatural in some way, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's a good definition. Like demons are monsters, but because they're otherworldly. But as we see in more modern times, they're not necessarily dangerous,
Mm.
right? And
Yeah.
which is great. That's something I love to explore. Is the alternatives to monsters being just inherently evil,
Mm.
whereas maybe they are just otherworldly,
Yeah.
and unnatural to our plane of existence, right?
Right.
Yeah,
They're just different.
um,
They're just a little different.
they're different. They're just a little different. Yeah. Um, so yeah, I think
That's awesome.
the more classic definition would be this like danger plus the otherworldly and unnatural creature of some sort,
Yep.
um, would define a monster.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love that. I think that's really fun. I think that we can explore so much with that, And I love this idea, right, of this supernatural, right? This not necessarily something maybe we can relate to, but
Yeah.
also with you saying, right, us learning that monsters don't necessarily have to be inherently evil. That's also interesting too. I think
Mhm.
especially when we as humans, right, maybe we're watching something or we're reading something or hearing a story with a monster in it, and sometimes we relate more to the monster, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes we see ourselves in that way because maybe we're a little different too.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
I think that's
absolutely.
what's great about your definition.
Yeah. Well, and even like when we think about things like the modern Mothman, right? I'm seeing the
Yeah.
picture behind you, um,
Yes.
and it's like So is the Mothman evil, or is he misunderstood? Are we not understanding the, why the Mothman is the Mothman? Is that the situation? Right? Like as we dig into and create our own folklore and stories around the Mothman. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's a great thing to explore.
Oh yes, it's fun. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's so creative and exciting, and I always I love when scary stories or what have you just take us on a journey that we don't expect. Um,
Oh,
and it's fun seeing that, and especially with like yeah, like you mentioning legends, right?
mhm.
And cryptids like the Mothman and things, and
Yeah.
how in a lot of people's stories, right, they're just the warning symbol, right? Like they
Yeah,
didn't
they are.
and a lot of the times they didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
They just happened to be there when something bad happened.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I feel like a lot of monsters and a lot of folklore and a lot of legends and cryptids
Yeah,
they're inherently just warnings in story form, right?
yeah.
They're cautionary tales
Yes,
of
yes.
like, hey, don't do this, it's bad, and if you
Right.
do this, you're gonna be eaten,
Eaten.
right? Right, and that's the like the I just lost the word. Well, if you do something bad, that's the consequence. That's the
Yeah,
consequence if you do something bad, or
yeah,
you wander off in the forest. You're gonna the you know the Wendigo will eat you, or the
yeah,
tea kettler will
yeah.
come and boil you alive, or different things like that, right? Like those were stories to just be like, hey kids, don't go play in the forest. It can be dangerous out there. It's probably wolves and
You
coyotes
know,
that we're more worried about, but this otherworldly danger like really solidifies it.
it's so fun. It's so fun and so creative, you know?
Oh yeah, yeah, and they had to have built over time
Yeah.
these stories, right? They just get more and more grandiose and more until they reach this pinnacle of just like, okay, this is now the monster. This is it, and
Yes,
we're going to tell all of the kids what this is, and then they're going to grow up and tell all their kids what it was, right?
exactly.
That's exactly it.
It's the beautiful thing about folklore and storytelling, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's so much fun. Everybody can do it. No matter where you're from, no matter who you are, right? Like everybody has folklore. Everybody can
Yep,
relate on that, and
everybody.
everybody can have fun with it.
Yep. Oh, absolutely. I live kind of outside of the Appalachian Mountains at this point, and
Yes.
I love Appalachian just folklore. It
It's
is
awesome.
so terrifying
Yeah,
and
it
so
is.
much fun. And
Mhm.
not even like specific monsters, but like the more modern folklore of just like we don't look out our windows at night
Yeah,
because we don't want to see the thing looking back. Because if you do look out your window, it will attract the thing that's going to be looking back in.
that is
And you don't
correct.
do that, and you're just
Yeah.
like, that's
Yeah.
terrifying.
It's
And I love
freaky.
it. And I still shut my blinds to this day.
Yeah,
Right?
because of that reason, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
Oh
what's
yeah.
so rich. Like it's
Yeah.
so exciting when you see folklore tied to a region like
Yeah.
Appalachia, right? Because of the mountainous regions and the woodsy areas, right? And
Oh yeah.
just oh, the monsters you hear that come out of it, and
Oh yeah.
the
The
rituals.
skinwalkers. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah, the witcher.
yes.
Oh, skinwalkers terrify me.
Oh,
Because
haunting,
I was,
haunting.
yes, I was driving back home through the mountains at like 9 o'clock at night about 2, 3 weeks ago,
Oh my
and
god.
I was going. It was like switchback, roads, pitch black, no street lights, and I was just waiting, like internalized waiting. I'm just like, I'm going to turn a corner, and it's going to be a
Yeah.
deer on its hind legs staring at me, and I'm going to die, right?
Today.
Like today,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
They stick with you. And I was,
Yes.
you're not in any real danger, but like it gets your adrenaline going. It, gets you warmed up. Where it's,
Oh
your
yeah.
blood's pumping. And I love
Yes.
that.
It's so fun. It keeps you like, looking at your rear view mirror, right? Like
You're
all
like,
these
oh,
things, like what's going to happen? What's going to present
right.
itself?
What was that
And
red that just flashed in the rearview mirror? Yeah.
yes,
Was it
yes,
eyes?
exactly.
Was it the
Exactly.
Mothman? Yeah.
And you just don't know. You don't know.
Yeah.
And there's that sense too, right? And that's the beautiful thing about cryptids and legend telling, right? Is this sense of believability, right? And
Yeah.
like what actually happened? Did these things
Hmm.
actually happen or exist or do they not? Which is so much fun.
Oh, it's a blast. Yeah. No, I love them. And I feel like there's that suspension of disbelief where, like, inherently I know they don't exist, but
Right.
I'm okay suspending that for a bit, especially when I'm out in the woods and being like, no, they exist.
Yeah,
Until I
they
get
sure
back to the
do.
safety of my home, they exist, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Because it's that running up the basement stairs after you turn the lights
Oh,
off, right? That and that relief, that tension release when you get to the top and you shut the basement door and you're like, okay, whatever monster's down there can't get me now because I've closed the
I closed the
door.
door, and
I've
they don't
closed
know
the
how to
door.
open it.
Fine. Right? It's that tension and release
Yeah,
that I think people
yeah.
get addicted to, and that's why I think
Yes.
that's why people like being scared.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah,
It literally takes you out of your body. It takes you out of your brain. It
yeah.
puts you in the moment, which is so hard to be in sometimes.
It
You
is.
know, it's calming. I'm right there with you. Like there'll be times, like I actually remember like during the pandemic and stuff, when things were heavy and things were scary and stuff. I remember being like, I am gonna blast through so many different horror movies right now because
Right.
I want to be lost. I want to be lost in that. I want to be scared by that
Yep.
thing. I want to,
Be
I want
super
to.
focused. Yeah.
Yes, yes, exactly. And I think you're right when it comes to, right, like we just talked about like legend tripping even, right? Like trying to
Mhm.
perform the legends themselves to see like, oh, will the Mothman actually come? Right? Will the Fresno Nightcrawler actually show up? All these
Right. Yes.
things. And it's fun. It's so exhilarating to be a part of
Yeah.
something like that. To be
I
scared,
still
as you
remember
said.
as kids, we would go into the bathroom, turn off the lights, and chant Red Rum to see if she would appear in the mirror. Right? Like things like that.
Yes.
And you're terrified the whole time. Like going into the bathroom as a kid to get ready to do this, you're like in tears because you're
Tears.
so afraid, but you're not going to stop.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
It
it's so
is.
much fun. You're gonna do it again next week, right? It's
Yeah.
it's
Oh, yeah,
it's
exactly.
it's so
Like,
fun.
she
It's so
didn't get me
fun.
this week. I can do
Yeah.
it. I'm going to test it again. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. It's so much fun.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is. That and like, oh, I forget. I don't even know if this is a truthful, well, folklore, but
Yeah.
like the boogeyman was a
Yes.
big issue for me growing up,
Yes.
like
Yes.
in the closet. But then there was somebody told me that the boogeyman can come from dark water, and that has
Really?
stuck with me. Yeah, and that has stuck with me for a long time. And
Oh
so
man.
um like going to the bathroom at night, like as a kid, that's
Oh
dark water. Toilet's dark
no.
water. If you ran a bath and you turned off the light in the bathroom, that's dark
Dark
water.
water.
Boogeyman can come from there.
Andy,
That stuck with me for so long, where I just
that's
could not be
haunting.
around. Yeah, I could not be around dark water because I was just expecting this thing to come up from it, and the big, long, lanky style boogeyman. Yeah, that was
Yes.
a
Yes.
thing.
Yes. Yes.
I'd forgotten about that.
Oh my gosh. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Like you said, right? And those things stick with you, right? Though that is
Hmm.
that is your
Yeah.
origin story for the boogeyman, and that's how you believe it
Yep.
to be for the rest of your life.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
God.
And it's one where like and it builds, right? Like it didn't start as dark water. It started as like, oh, the boogeyman's in your dark closet. It's in the
Yeah.
darkness of your closet. And so
Yeah.
if you can see the back wall, the boogeyman can't be there, right? Well,
Yep.
that means I'm going to keep my closet clean. But then
Yep.
it shifted and it changed, right? And
Yeah.
like I can't clean dark water.
Yep.
It's
That's
just
just
there.
kind of there.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, and I don't even like I can't tell you where the origin was for that. I don't know. I don't know
Yeah.
who told me. I don't know where they got it from. I think that's one of the beautiful things of it is it just lives in my brain now.
Yeah.
And that's
Haunting
what
you.
is. Yep, me specifically, and
Oh
hopefully
my
all of our
gosh.
listeners now too.
Yep. Good luck taking a shower tonight, kids.
Right, as the power goes out.
I know. Oh my, no,
Right.
no, no, no. Let's be honest. I'm gonna be the one that's gonna be the most scared out of this entire
I will
conversation.
absolutely just leave the bath if I'm like taking a shower and the lights go out. I am
Yeah,
leaving the bathroom.
I'm done.
I'm not. I don't even know if I'll turn the water off. I'm just like,
Right,
oh, we
right.
gotta go.
Bye, everybody.
Right.
Going to bed.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah,
Covers
no.
provide safety.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely. That's so funny. That's creepy too. What a
Yeah.
creepy idea.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's
Uh-uh.
like, and we also like wolves used to play a big part in the horror stories that we would tell each other as kids too. And so
Yeah.
like I remember thinking, like I would be going to sleep and I would be thinking that I could feel like a wolf's breath on me. And usually it's probably just the ceiling fan and like the heat's running is usually, you know,
Gosh.
now that I'm adult, right? But like
Sure.
you would get like this breeze of something on your face and you're like, the wolf's staring at me in the dark.
Oh
I
my
can't see it.
gosh.
But as long as I keep my eyes closed, it can't see me, right? I hope. that was my childhood. Where like
That's
all these different stories.
terrifying.
That was great.
It's just fantastic. Not at the
Yeah.
time, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
No, yeah, at
Um,
the time it was just like, oh, I can't go to sleep. Okay, I know if I go to sleep, the wolf disappears, right? I'm asleep,
yeah.
the wolf isn't there. Yeah. Oh,
Yes.
it was crazy.
And you had such a brilliant imagination, right? Like to think
Oh, we
up
always
these
played
things.
imaginary games. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's even scarier, right? Is these monsters, these creatures that exist in the dark and exist
Yeah.
anywhere in that case, right? Where you can't see or don't understand
Oh,
what's in
yeah.
front of you. Um
Yeah.
cool, because they can, like you said, they can morph, they can change as you grow older, as you have different scenarios or things happen to you, like they
Oh,
do
yeah.
too.
Yeah. And I think that's why I had put down on my sheet about the Wendigo. One of the reasons the Wendigo
Yeah.
had stuck with me so long is that that was the boogeyman while out camping. That was the boogeyman of the forest. And like the, you know, a squirrel running down from the tree and across the leaves and back up a tree, like that wasn't a squirrel in like while I'm out camping. I'm laying there and I'm like, oh, that's footsteps. You know, it's
Yes.
close. You got to be quiet. Hold your breath. Don't like, oh, did I have a granola bar? Can it smell the granola bar in my breath? Right, which
Yeah.
is a problem in bear country, but obviously, but like, you
Well,
know,
yeah.
yeah. But it was definitely one of those where you're just like, okay, no, don't make any noise, don't make any noise. Like, what is that?
Yeah.
Where
He's
it's like,
here.
yeah, he's here. Yeah, it was a whole thing. Yeah, it's
Ooh,
great.
I'm so excited. Okay, so speaking of, right, one of the most truthfully terrifying
Yeah.
entities, especially when we're talking about wilderness horror and horror that exists outside, right? Please tell us, Andy, who is the Wendigo?
Oh man, the Wendigo. The Wendigo is a it is it when I was talking about monsters not necessarily being evil, the Wendigo is specifically specified as an evil spirit or a malicious spirit
Mm-hmm.
whose sole purpose is the hunger of human flesh and an insatiable hunger at that, right? And it's this idea of the I believe the origin is if a human ever tastes human flesh, they become a Wendigo, and so then they, you know, their body morphs into this gaunt, hungry, you know, because they're always hungry, and so they become this
Yeah.
gaunt creature that just is always looking for human flesh, and once they taste it once, they can't get enough of it, kind of
Ooh.
thing, right? And I believe I believe it started with the Algonquin,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they're in the like in the Canadian forest and the boreal forest around like the Great Lakes area and northern Canada,
Yes.
or today's northern Canada. And so like there's this idea of, you know, this creature in the dark woods and the forest and the woad, right?
Oof.
And that yeah, that like gaunt figure. Some depictions, more modern depictions, have, you know, like the deer antlers in the forest,
Yes.
and so that whole concept of like, you know, you know, seeing a deer standing upright in the forest, terrifying.
Terrifying.
Um, but yeah, this idea of just an inherently malicious spirit that
Oof.
their purpose is to hunt and eat human, right? It's that is it. And I think it was a ultimately a warning story about like, you know, during winter months when you're running low on food and you're starting to get hungry, it was a taboo. It's like, hey, don't eat your fellow humans,
Right.
right? That's the taboo.
Right.
That's the story. It's like you don't want to turn into this monster
Right.
because then we have to hunt that monster.
Right.
You know, and so I think that's kind of where it really came from. But
Yeah.
now it's of course morphed into this. It is a monster in and of itself, and it's wonderful and terrifying. Yeah,
All in a beautiful little bow.
all in a beautiful little bubble. It's a great story, not to tell children, you know, eating human flesh for children. I mean, back in the '90s, that's what they would tell us. But like,
Oh, yes.
yeah,
Yes.
they were like, "You're gonna
Absolutely.
get eaten," and you're like, "Oh, okay,"
Thanks.
right? Thanks, appreciate that. I'll never sleep again.
Yeah, literally. Oh,
But yeah, like in that idea of like the glowing eyes out in the forests, and
yes.
it's probably owls or a cat or something, but like, or a dog.
Sure.
But no, it's a Wendigo, right?
Ooh.
And yeah, it used to definitely keep me from wandering too far from the fire, which
Oh, I bet.
So I'm sure it served the goal as to why I was originally told about the Wendigo.
Oh,
Um, but yeah, um, it was pretty cool. For the longest time, I thought the scream of a fox was the Wendigo catching its prey, so a human, because foxes scream like humans,
yeah.
and then coyotes were the call of a Wendigo,
Yeah.
was what I
Ooh.
believed for a while. And so, like,
Yeah.
being out in um, a forest, and you hear the fox call, and you hear the coyotes howling in the distance and stuff, you're just like, oh, I just got to make it through the night. I can make it through the
Oh
night,
my
right? And there's
gosh.
that huge fear. And then you make it to the next day, and you're like, I'm going to make a cup of coffee, right? And
Yeah,
everything's
woohoo!
fine.
I made
Yep.
it.
You're like, I slept exactly 30 minutes last
Yeah,
night.
that's
Um,
it.
right?
Literally. Yeah. Because
Um,
that's haunting. Those
mhm.
sounds, like, even if you saw a fox do it right in front of you, right? Like,
Oh, it's a
those
terrifying noise.
that's scary.
Like, what
It's
does the fox
scary.
say? It's terrifying. You don't need
Terror.
to hear it. It's terror.
Yeah, yeah.
It's absolute
Pure
terror.
evil.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I,
Oh,
I I still remember being out with somebody who did not know what a fox actually sounded like, and hearing what
yeah.
essentially sounded like a child being murdered. And please take that out if that's gonna like get you
Nope.
demonetized or something.
No,
But
you're
like,
okay. You're
but
okay.
like, um, they were like, "Oh my gosh, what is that?" And I had this split second where I was like, "Do I tell them the story or do I tell them the truth?"
What did you
Right?
do?
I told them the truth. I couldn't.
You're
Well,
so
like
nice.
we were in our 20s at that point. I was like, nah, I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't be like, well, the Wendigo's having a
He's,
feast.
yeah,
No,
he's
it's
he's
like
really close by.
he's really close. We need to go.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, right? I was like, no, I was like, hey, that's actually a fox. And they're like, what? And I was like, yeah, yeah, no, hold on. And I like pulled up my phone and like showed them like a audio clip of an actual fox. And they're like, that's not okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
pretty scary.
But I love that because you can easily take that, right? Especially if you
Yeah.
don't know. If you're sitting around, and you want to pull a prank on somebody and you have that kind of sound going on, it's so easy to build off that to create stories. Now, obviously you don't want to do
Yes.
that and like just lie to somebody and give them terrors, but
Sure.
honestly that's kind of it's kind of what happens.
It's a good
Um,
time.
it is a good time. And then after they wake up the next day and you are pouring them some coffee and making them some bacon and eggs, you're just like, hey, by the way, that's a fox.
Yeah,
Just
don't worry
so you
about it.
know. Now
Don't worry.
that is you didn't sleep last night, I'll tell you the truth. But right.
Yeah. Yes.
So
Oh, I
yeah,
love it.
I love it.
It's so
And
beautiful.
yeah.
It's I mean, I just love those monsters, right? That have the earth ingrained
Oh
in
yeah.
them, like, in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Um,
Like a
you know?
natural spirit, an earthen spirit, something
Yes.
of the right, like of the lake, of the sea, of the
Yes.
woods, of the
Yes.
desert, right? I love
Yes.
all of that. And how they just describe these, they take these things that don't seem natural, right? They are natural, but they don't seem natural, and they build and build and build upon them.
Yes.
um
Yes.
and it just, yeah, there's so many great and wonderful stories come of it.
Mm, definitely, definitely. And I think, like you said, right, like originated from Algonquian folklore, right?
Yeah.
And indigenous and Native American folklore. Um, their horror world is some of the most
Wow.
terrifyingly,
Yeah.
hauntingly beautiful, like, legends and spirits you will ever hear in your
Oh yeah.
life. And I think what's so interesting, Andy, that you mentioned, right, is like with the Wendigo, there's so many different variations of course, iconically, of a folklore monster, right? There's so many versions and ways it exists. And I think you mentioned, right, this idea of humanity, right? This
Mhm.
versus kind of like, if you eat
Yeah.
human, right? It makes you question, like, what are your morals? Who are you as a person?
Yeah.
And there's that, right? Like man versus man kind of vibe to it. And I feel like in a lot of indigenous folklore, there is that moral compass. There is that um, if you messed up, you will be
Oh yeah.
haunted for the rest of your life. You know what I mean? Like you are
Oh,
cursed.
absolutely. Yeah. It feels like, there was a lot of stories being told as ways to get behavior that was societally acceptable, right?
Yeah,
Hey, maybe don't eat humans. That's not okay.
yeah,
We're going to tell, and we're going to build this story, and we're going to basically say, hey, you become a monster. And really,
yeah.
that's society saying you're a monster if you do this action.
Right.
And I know there's, like, I think we talked about skinwalkers a little bit too. I think skinwalkers have a similar backstory of
Yeah.
they are humans that have become corrupted, lost their humanity in these different ways,
Hmm.
and became these things. Um, and so I see, yeah, I see a lot of that in folklore, which is
Yeah.
great.
Yes, it is. It is. It's so there's so much to take away from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it lends itself to the like uncanny, right? Like our like, oh, we are so repellent to uncanny things that are almost human or almost real but aren't. And folklore
Yes.
fills that perfectly because we see human like things in almost all of it, but
Yeah.
it's uncanny. Yeah.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. It's familiar. It's not supposed to be. Like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even as
Oh.
simple as like a cat standing on its hind legs. Get that out of
Yeah.
here. I want nothing to do with it. That is too
Nope.
human. Don't want it. Right?
Yes.
Especially when their
Yes.
like legs are just forward and they're just like, oh, hello. And you're like,
Oh
no,
no.
no, no,
I
no.
hate it here.
All fours,
Yeah.
please. Yeah. I
I'm
can't.
uncomfortable. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Oof.
And then
And
I think that, oh, go ahead.
no, no, go for it. Go for it.
I was going to say the really big question. I think this is in line with like legend and folklore and the
Yeah.
horror piece to it is we have at the very base of our brain this aversion to uncanny. And the question was asked, what existed before that made that a survival trait that evolution
Mhm.
selected for? There something that was almost human but not, and it was dangerous to us?
Mhm.
I hate that thought.
I also thank you for giving me
Hate.
that thought.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And is that still around?
Right. Like
No.
why is it still so prevalent?
Yeah. Yeah.
Ugh.
I
I
know.
love it. I love it.
Right.
It's
I love
so
it.
sticky icky and it's I mean that's what's so cool about the Wendigo, right? Is
Mhm.
and I'm curious to hear your version in terms of like the rules you've heard associated with the
Mhm.
Wendigo or like how it haunts, how it attacks and things. And it, when I first heard about it, the thing that freaked me out the most, at least from what I had heard, right, is that it does have the ability to mimic. It has
Mhm.
that ability to be just like somebody you know. Um, whether that's like in the calls, like you can hear somebody calling you and you shouldn't
Yeah.
go because it's too late. Like that person is not there.
It
Um,
lures.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, it lures. And I'm curious, did you hear similar or did you hear other ways in which it haunts?
Yeah. So some of the things that is so like the story that I always had was like it is this tall, large, gaunt, but it also like steps lightly.
Huh.
Like it is difficult to hear it coming. It can hide behind trees. It can do calls, right? It can mimic human voice.
Oof.
Which reminds me, it was one of the best scenes that I've ever seen in a movie. This is tangentially related to the Wendigo.
Yes.
Is the in Annihilation, the boar.
Oh. Ooh, I
I don't know
haven't
if
seen
you've seen
this.
that
No,
movie.
but tell us anyway.
Okay, so the boar mimics its last victim's voice and is able to talk in a humanistic voice. And I'm not going to try to recreate it because it was just absolutely haunting. And you all should go watch Annihilation. But
Yeah.
it wasn't a jump scare. It was just one where you hear it and you're like, oh no, that's not this. That's not the person. I know it's not the person. And then it continues on, and there's no jump scare, right? It's just panning the camera, and it happens, and you're just like, oh
I
my gosh.
hate
And
that. Yeah.
I hate it. And that reminds, yeah, that was Wendigo-esque, where like it could make
Mm.
calls out. um, but also
Yes.
this idea of like it can fit behind a tree. Doesn't matter how thick the tree is. It can be a skinny tree and it will hide behind it, right? And you might just see its head, like a tree like this
It's
big, you might just see its
mhm.
head like pop out and
Mhm.
it's this huge thing, right? And then it like goes back behind the tree and it's gone again. And you're just like and so that's where the whole like, oh, the glowing eyes, it's the Wendigo looking out from behind the tree, right? It's owls, but like, looking out from behind the tree. And
Yeah.
making human calls, like you might hear that human call in distance, it's a fox. Right, like, different things like that. Or it's the campers that are across the park, and
Yes.
they say something really loud all of a sudden, where because they got spooked at the campsite, right? And you're like, oh,
Right.
that's actually the Wendigo saying something, right, across the park. Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. So but I think that the gauntness, hiding behind a tree, light
Yes.
footsteps, always hunting, looking,
Always.
not necessarily hunting, but always looking.
Yeah.
Right, it just is
Mhm.
it's just on a prowl. It's just trying to fight. If it
Yes.
happens to come across you, it will eat you, but it might not necessarily be actively hunting you,
Right.
right?
It's just
And so
good
that
at
was
it.
one. It's just good at it.
Yeah.
It's just meandering the forest, and if it comes across a human, it's going to eat that human, right? One of those.
Yes.
And if it spots you, right?
Ooh. Ooh.
Oh, oh God. So like I
Haunting.
think those are generally the rules that like I knew. The mimicking, right? Like taking on the human self, like another
Yeah.
human
Yeah.
in the shape. I hadn't heard that one,
Oh,
but
okay.
mimicking the human voice, I have.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd
I've
be
heard
interesting.
yeah, yeah, like different
Yeah.
people say different things. Like they take the pieces of the skin that they eat, right, and wear it
Oh
in a
yes.
way. Like I've seen
Yep.
that, which is just I hate that. That's
Yep.
that's terrifying. So terrifying.
Yep. Edgar from Men in Black. Yep. That.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Put on
1000% that.
put on the skin suit. Yep.
Exact
Ugh.
that is what it is, right? And
Yep.
I've
Yeah.
also heard it can take time to fully take over your body, right? So like you could be standing next to a
Oh
human
yeah.
looking person, but they're changing, or about to change
Oh
or
yeah.
something like that, you know?
It just shift.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, there's a shift. And
Yep.
that's so brilliant. That's so, I don't know, it plays with your ideas again of believability, of trust, that moral code again, right? Like it's constantly challenging you,
Oh
um,
yeah.
which is so terrifying.
It is. It is. I mean, it's definitely a warning story of just like, if somebody shows their true self, right? Wendigo being the true
Yeah.
self, believe
Yeah.
them, and also get out. Yeah, yeah. That shift of like taking the human mask off, and
Yeah.
like the
Yep.
monster
Yep.
behind it. Yep.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Have you, in your experience, have you heard about any ways that like the Wendigo could be defeated?
So no, I have not. So
Yeah.
because it was never. So for me, monsters are never anything to be defeated,
Ooh,
right?
yes. Tell us
Ever.
more about this. Yes.
So if you can defeat a monster, its power over you is gone, at least from a storytelling perspective.
Sure. Sure.
And so if it was like, well, here's the Wendigo, and here's all of its weaknesses, and here's how you fight it, and here's how you overcome it, or right, and you're just like, oh, okay, cool, that's just something I need to. I'll just not, you know,
Yeah.
have to worry
Yeah.
about that. It's like, oh, hey, if you see uh what Bloody Mary in the mirror, red rum, and all of that, then well, what you do is you have salt and you do X and you do. Well,
Right.
then what am I afraid of it for? Right? I know how
Mm,
to overcome this, and
yeah.
so at least in the stories that I've been told, and kind of how I've gone through life, I've never even thought about how to defeat a Wendigo because it's just
Yeah.
one where it's just like that's not something you do. You hide from it, you avoid it, right? And that's
Yeah.
how you defeat it. Um, but I do. The only thing I do know is that there is some way out there that it can be defeated. I've just never looked it up.
But I like that, Andy. I like that concept, right? Because you're right. You're absolutely right. I think a lot of the
Yeah.
times in any sort of like video game or something, right? Like you're given the exact rules on how
Yep.
to do this, on how to defeat this creature. It may be hard, but you could do it.
Yeah.
And I think there is something more chilling about no, like you can't.
It's
There's not a way. It will never stop. right? And I think that's kind of beautiful because a lot of us have monsters like that. A lot of us have monsters that we can't defeat, let alone even right like
Yeah.
acknowledge, let alone even fully see all of
Yeah.
the time.
You just got to find a way to live with them.
Yeah.
Hopefully avoid them. Yeah.
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 Yeah. And
Exactly.
I like that. I like keeping it that way with the Wendigo.
Yeah.
Is because again, it is such like, and it's tall, people. Like it is a big boy. It's a big
Yeah.
creature.
I think it's something like 7-8 feet tall is what
Yeah.
the lore says. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's huge.
Ooh,
Yeah,
it's I don't know.
I think
Oof.
especially from like when you brought up like games and things, and I feel like that's my biggest critique of things like Cthulhu games
Yeah.
is there is a way to defeat some of the creatures, or you can overcome Cthulhu in some of these Lovecraftian games, right? I was like, no,
Sure.
that defeats the whole purpose. That defeats the whole purpose of what the Lovecraftian universe and the
Yeah.
Cthulhu is all about. It is
Yeah.
beyond us. All
Yeah.
we can do is hope to survive with a little bit of our sanity left intact. Like that's the
Yeah.
best outcome. And
Yes.
so like having games like that where like as soon as you give hit points to a monster and we know we can defeat it,
Yeah.
it's not scary anymore. We can defeat it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like, and that's how I feel about like the Wendigo and a lot of these bigger monsters, and especially like the Kraken, like Mothman, like
Yeah.
all of these different things is like, no, you don't defeat these, you avoid them,
Yes.
you try not
Yeah.
to approach them or have them approach you. That's the goal.
Right. Exactly. And
Yeah.
and I love that. I love that you brought in Lovecraft to this. And I mean, there's these creatures that are older, that are more ancient than we could ever truly
Yeah.
understand. And it was never our playing field to begin with, right? Like we are
Nope.
not in control. We do not have right
Right. Yeah.
that sense. And to think that you could defeat it is almost a step back. Like
Yeah.
it is not true. I mean, we could even go into the idea and the concept of ego and things like that. And I think that's what's so cool about these ancient creatures is like, for example, like the Wendigo. Maybe you'll defeat, quote unquote, however you would do that. I don't know
Yeah.
how, right? Like a person that is the Wendigo. You don't think that it's already transmitted into something else, right? Like you don't
That's
think
it.
it's haunted
Yep.
something else at this point. You're crazy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. That's exactly it.
It's there. And again, it brings in this idea of these human feelings of insatiability, of never feeling full, of wanting more, of wanting more, of wanting more, and never being satisfied. And I think that's terrifying and happens all the time. And that is you can't defeat that.
No.
You can't.
No, you can't. And it does pass from person to person, and
Yeah.
it yeah you it an outside force cannot defeat insatiability, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
No, no, I totally agree.
That's creepy.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
I'm curious, Andy, too, like from little Andy, right, hearing about these
Yeah.
stories on the campfires and things like to Andy now, right?
Hmm.
What has stuck with you in terms of the things that are terrifying about the Wendigo, right? Like why has the Wendigo stuck with you for so long?
I think it is the unknownness, right?
Mm.
Like, yeah, we have stories about it, but it is always it exists in the dark. It is unseen until it is, you know, too late, right? And so this idea of um, the bump in the dark, right? The unknown in the darkness, the unknown that we cannot see, the unknown that we can't understand. Um, it's those aspects of it that have stuck.
Mm.
And so, especially when you talk about storytelling, that's what makes something kind of scary and creepy is once you reveal the monster, once the monster is revealed and it's you've interacted with it, it's a little less scary. But for
Yeah.
the Wendigo, you're talking about like it can hide behind trees, which means it can be anywhere. Um,
Anywhere.
anywhere. And so, you know, whenever you're out at night, like just feeling that chill in your spine of just
Yeah.
like looking at a tree and and you just have that split moment where you're like, is it behind that tree?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Even as an adult, right? And I know it's not, right?
Yep.
The top surface of my brain absolutely is like, no, Andy, stop being silly. Um, but part of me is like, no, I want to feel that. I want to feel that, like, is it there? It might be. It's dark out. That's a tree. It could be hiding behind.
I
That
know.
I don't know what it is about that, but it's just a little tinge, right, of the
Yeah.
back of like maybe I'll walk a little faster,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
just for fun. Um,
Yeah.
so I think that has definitely stuck with me over time. Is this like hidden presence in the dark?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It seems like it. I feel like that's your theme. I think, especially when talking about everything we've talked about today so far, right? Like
yeah.
the ghosts and the boogeyman,
Oh,
and red
man.
rum, and talking about all these things. Like the unknown is so scary, and I think
Mhm.
that sticks with us from young to old, right?
Yeah.
Like it's. I mean, we were talking right about social anxiety, right?
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
there is so much unknown with anxiety, and you're like, something is happening, I'm scared, there, I feel unsafe, I feel uncomfortable, like
Hmm.
I'm nervous, I don't even know why or what it is or how, or right, like, and I don't know, I feel like these monsters that manifest in that way um are so brilliant, but also that's why they stick with us. We still
Oh,
have
yeah.
those fears um of things that we just can't understand.
Oh, I totally agree with that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, even yeah, I was, like we were talking about, like just before coming on, like I have the social anxiety of like coming on and talking online. A lot of that is the unknown, right? What are we going to say? What are we going to talk about? What if there's, dead silence and,
Yeah.
something goes wrong or my mic cuts out or, right? Like these unknowns that we don't know. And then you get into it and everything's fine. Like I don't feel anxious
Yeah.
now that I'm doing it and I never do.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it's that unknown. It's that creep leading up to it. The last 10 minutes are the longest, right? Because you're
Yeah.
just waiting there and you're like, okay, it's going to
What will
start.
happen?
Everything's going wrong.
Yeah.
Nothing's
Yeah.
happening. Everything's going wrong, right?
Everything.
Exactly it.
Everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Oof.
absolutely.
And characters like the Wendigo thrive in that, I think.
Oh,
Like
yes.
so
Yes.
beautifully, you know?
Because it is all unknown. It is what could happen.
Yeah.
What could happen.
Yeah.
And, especially with something like the Wendigo, it is, you hear a noise or you look at a tree or, you hear a voice and it's that unknown. And that's where the Wendigo lives, is in that unknown.
Yeah. Ugh. Oh, it gives me the chills. It's so scary.
Right?
Yeah.
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 I am looking forward to I used to go winter camping a lot. I don't
Oh,
as
yeah.
much anymore. Winter camping is a special sort of horror because you can see for so far in the dark, but also see absolutely nothing
Oh,
because there's no foliage.
right.
Um, yeah, and so I used to do that, but I am actually looking forward to doing more camping again. This last year I didn't get to go, just if nothing else, to go listen to the leaves crunch and be like, "What
Yeah.
is that?"
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's
Scare
been a
yourself.
while. Exactly. Yeah, to go scare yourself.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Some
That's
people watch
awesome.
horror movies. I go out in the forest.
You go find one. You go find, you go
Yeah,
write your own.
I go find some terror. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I love that. It's so funny. You're just like my dad. My dad has always been that way because we lived in the Southwest, right? So
Okay.
we would camp in the desert all the time.
Oh
And
man.
so I feel you there on the coyote yips and the that terrifying feeling of I don't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad's just like you. He, ever since he was a kid, like that was his escape. He was like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go find something scary today.
Yeah.
And also enjoy the stars and enjoy the beautiful desert and whatnot. But
Oh yeah.
it's it's a freeing kind of feeling.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
It releases you from like having to solve a problem, I think, as
Yeah.
well. So it's
Yeah.
like I can't, I'm just here. I'm just going to exist. I'm just going to try to survive the night,
Yeah.
and sleep. And there isn't like a, oh well, I can fix this. I can fix the feeling, or I can fix the monster, right?
Yeah,
Nope. You're just here to survive.
exactly.
Um, yeah.
Whether you like it or not.
Yep. You just let it go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Andy, we're getting down to our last few questions,
Okay.
unfortunately, but
Right.
what I'm curious, do you think then that the Wendigo is a monster? Why or why not?
I do. I
Yeah.
think the Wendigo is just a kind of almost a prime example of like a fundamental monster,
Mm,
right? Because it is inherently evil. It is malicious. It inspires fear
mm,
at any given time. It's an example of a warning against losing one's humanity.
yeah.
Um, it persists. Um, so yeah, I think the Wendigo, at its core is what a lot of monsters kind of build off of. Um,
Hmm.
it is the boogeyman, in my opinion, right? It is
Yeah.
that thing that appears and causes horror, and is a monstrosity, um, without humanity. It's uncanny,
Mm,
right? So
yeah.
all of those things, I think the Wendigo embodies all of it, more
Yeah.
so than probably a lot of monsters. Like I don't know of anybody that's making cute, Wendigo chibi blankets, right? Like the Wendigo's scary. It's just scary. Right?
Yeah.
I hope one of your listeners now goes out and they're like, well, I know what I'm designing next.
Listen, I was gonna say I have seen a couple that
Oh, you
float
have?
online, a couple of cryptid creators and let
Oh,
me tell you something. It's
I'm here
like
for it.
it's so it's so cute, right? Of course it is.
Right?
But
Yeah.
yet, because it's the Wendigo, and sometimes they'll have the ribs, right? Like the exposed
Yes.
ribs, or like
Yep.
the antlers in the face. And it's hilarious because it is scary.
Yeah.
It is a hard, I don't know how they do it. It is a hard
Right.
monster to make cute and cuddly.
Right. Yeah.
It
Yes.
is.
Like there's so many other there's so many other cryptids and monsters out there where you're like, no, we can make this cute and cuddly. That's fine. Like we can make their eyes a little bit bigger, and maybe
Yeah.
we make them a little rounder.
Yeah.
And this one's like, can we make the exposed ribs rounder? Like maybe can we oversize them a little bit? I don't
Yeah.
know. We
Yes.
don't want to make the antlers bigger,
No,
right?
certainly not.
Certainly not, right?
I've
So
seen, like, how sometimes I've seen some artist renditions of like the human heart is exposed in the Wendigo, like inside of the ribs. And so I've seen some
yeah,
creators like make it a cute heart, not an anatomical heart,
they're
but
just
a
like,
cutie.
right, yeah.
You know what I mean?
And you're like, you're getting close.
There it is. Yeah, exactly. I
Yeah.
feel it. That's cute.
Yep.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
it's
Sure wouldn't want to
hilarious.
meet one. Yeah.
Yeah, nope, nope,
See,
still
the thing is like
haunted by it.
I would meet a Mothman.
Yeah.
Like I think the Kraken's a cool animal that I would want to avoid, but I don't think it's inherently evil. I feel
Yeah.
like the Wendigo is like, it's just evil. It is,
Yeah.
or malicious, not necessarily evil, but just it is malicious, right,
Yeah.
at its core. Um,
Yeah.
which is one of the
Yeah.
reasons I think it's probably stuck with me. Everything else can be
Yeah.
made cute in my mind.
Not
Yeah,
him.
not him.
Not that guy.
Nope. No, not even a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Well, why do you think, Andy, that monsters in general are so important, right? Why should we keep talking about them or exploring them or playing games with them, right? Why
Oh
are they
yeah.
so necessary?
They are. I think monsters in general are a great warning, like a societal warning of
Yeah.
different things. Like we talked about that with the Wendigo about eating human. Obviously now we don't need to worry about people generally eating human flesh. So like that general
Right.
moral story is still good to have around, but like
Sure.
not maybe as necessary. But I
Yeah.
think monsters serve a purpose of being able to give warnings in story as to things that should or should not occur.
Yeah.
But also, I think it's healthy to feel fear or feel afraid, is from a storytelling perspective, from safety.
Yeah.
Um, just from it is difficult. It's just like can you enjoy a warm summer day if that's all you ever known?
Huh.
Or do you need to occasionally be cold to then appreciate being warm, right? And so this idea of a monster giving you fear in order to then appreciate your safety and security and not having to worry about, you know, that threat. Um, that's the
Yeah.
release, right? Like that's going back to the running up the stairs to avoid the quote unquote monster in the basement.
Yeah.
Is you're absolutely terrified running up the stairs, and then you close the door and like, okay,
Yeah. Yeah, that
right? You
release.
have that feeling, yeah.
Mhm.
And so I think monsters are very important to still provide that because we actually live in a generally like we're not hunted by wolves anymore. We're kind of the
Yep.
apex, you know, species.
Yeah.
As long as you're not swimming with a bunch of sharks or you know out with a bunch of you know grizzly
Right.
bears, you're generally okay.
Right.
So to still have that like feeling the fear, so then you like appreciate the safety and going about your normal day. I think that's very
Yeah.
important.
That's a lovely way of putting it. It
Yeah,
it's funny how it makes us feel more human to explore
yeah.
monstrosity, you know?
I yes, I do agree with that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it reaffirms. It's like that's a monster. At least like, and I don't do this, or this, so I'm
Yeah.
not monstrous. And
Yeah.
then when you get into trouble, you're like, ooh, I'm three of those five things. I need to reassess myself. Hold on.
Oh no. Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I feel like I do have a heart of ice. That's a problem.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I got to change that. Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Well, I know you just said that you would never, ever, ever want to meet a Wendigo. I
This is
know,
true.
but
Yes.
say in our imaginary world, right? You're
Yes.
relaxing. Maybe it is a Saturday evening, you know, you're hanging out. Maybe you're writing some games.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you hear, right, what seems to be a Wendigo. And you look out
Okay.
your window and it's there.
Yeah.
It's there, right in front of you.
Oh man.
What would you do in that situation, Andy? Would you say anything? What would you do?
I feel like so if I feel like if it happened for real, I would probably freak out. Like close the blind, go hide
Yeah.
under the bed, go to the base, like find this, like make sure all the doors are right, like
Yeah.
full panic. But I
Yeah.
also feel like part of me would like want to like crack the window and be like, "Hey, so what's your story?"
Oh
like,
yeah.
like, explain this to me because we have a bunch of stories about you, and then I would get eaten. But then,
Sure.
like, maybe, maybe he'd be like, you know, I would prefer chickens, but you guys keep them all cooped up now, so I gotta find somewhere, and y'all are easier, right? Like, I
Yeah.
don't know, like, what's the story,
Yeah.
right? But I would, yeah, so a little bit of both,
Ugh.
probably the panic. That'd
Spoken
be
like a true
terrifying,
author, I feel like Andy is like, let
right?
me hold on, wait a second. Let me talk to you for
Let
a
me get my
little
pen and
bit.
paper. Like, I have some questions,
Let me throw some
right?
game ideas at you. What do you think?
What do you think? How would you like to be portrayed in this
Yeah, yeah.
upcoming adapted film biography of the Wendigo? Yeah.
Thoughts? How are we
What?
feeling?
How are we feeling? On a scale of 1 to 10,
Yeah.
right? Exactly. Agree, disagree, somewhat disagree. Like, where are we at
Feeling pretty
on this
good.
topic? Yeah,
Oh,
I
you're
would absolutely.
angry?
Yeah. You're
Got it.
angry? Okay, that makes sense. I'll
Perfect.
just close the window.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Lock it back.
No,
Yeah.
man, I'll put our we had some steak for dinner. I'll leave that outside
Right.
and
So
don't
now,
yeah, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. You never saw me. We didn't talk.
exactly. I can
Yeah.
guarantee you I would never have the blinds open again, ever,
Oh,
even
yeah.
during the day. I'd be
Yeah,
like, no.
we are moving. We are never
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
we no windows ever again.
There'd be
It's
no
never.
forest.
No forest. Yeah, absolutely not. Heck
Yep.
no.
It'd be an underground bunker.
Yeah,
Right.
forever. For the rest of
Yep.
our days. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. I know. I might also like the other part of me would be like, you know, that'd be the perfect time to start up your paranormal society community in where, right? You're like, oh, they do
Yes.
exist. You're like,
Oh,
I thought
yeah.
this whole time. And then you're calling up people and you get the sleuths together and you meet down at the bookshop and you're doing
Oh,
research
yeah.
and it's Buffy the Vampire Slayer all over again. I'd be
Life has
there for that.
begun.
My life has begun. I was like, oh, okay. I have a calling now.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
So, good things can come from.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oof,
Definitely.
that'd be scary. Yeah.
Well, I can't
That'd be
wait until you make a Wendigo game. It's gonna be great.
I should make a win. I should do that.
You
I should
really
put that on
should.
my list. Yeah. So I have a game idea that is based on basically 1980s Colorado mystery game, like
Ooh.
Colorado like wilderness mystery.
Yes, yes.
And it will be like multiple. You'll be able to like choose your mystery kind of thing, right? That you want to play through,
Ooh,
and
yeah,
it'll be generalized to like corporate conspiracy or wilderness survival or things like that, right? And
yeah.
yeah, maybe one of them should be like Wendigo. I think that'd be cool. Or
It'd be
whatever
pretty
the
fun.
like Coloradan esque
Version.
Wendigo version of the folklore is. Yeah. Because
Ooh.
there's some type of Wendigo story
Oh,
for
definitely.
the area. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
local
maybe
to
we
the
do that.
region.
That'd be fun.
Yeah. Just
Yeah,
saying. It'd be cool. I'll
that'd be
buy
fun.
7 copies. I think that would be really fun.
Perfect. I'll just send them to you. That'd be great.
I would be
Yeah,
so thankful. That sounds so cool.
yeah, I'm gonna put that on my list.
And just so you know, please keep telling us about all the cool games that you're creating because what you're doing is truly masterful. And I just know it's such an exciting time for horror in that way. And
Oh
just
yeah.
gaming in general, right? And
Yeah,
exploration and journeys and storytelling. And so please keep them coming and keep telling
absolutely.
us about them.
And I usually go back and forth between like cozy and light and then like
Yeah.
my horror games. So I'm
Yeah,
working on a
yeah.
cozier game right now, and then yeah, I've the next one that's already in the works is a more like horror eldritch with monsters that you can't really they're the
Yes.
things that you can't defeat. Um, but yeah, so yeah, I don't think I'll stop making games anytime soon.
Well, good. We hope not.
Thank you.
Well,
So,
thank you so much for doing this, Andy. It was
yeah,
truly a
this was a
pleasure.
blast. I had a lot of fun. I appreciate you having me on. This was awesome.
Anytime. It was a joy. It was so much fun.
This episode of Floaties for Krakens was written and recorded by me, Camille Maria Costa. A monstrous thank you to Andy Boyd and Pandian Games for such a brilliant interview. A big thank you to Michael Kosman for producing a stellar episode, and a huge thank you to Natalie Hedberg for designing such a phenomenal logo. And music for the show was also written and produced by me, with a special appearance by my tata, Toby Acosta. Thank you all so much for tuning into today's show. It truly means everything. If you have questions or curiosities about the research or media referenced in today's episode, everything will hopefully be in the description box. And you can find us on our website and our socials, links in the description as well. Anyway, thanks again for being here, everyone. And just a reminder, it's okay to be afraid of the monster, but it's also okay to love the heck out of it too. Keep being monstrous and keep shining bright.